How do you incubate chicken eggs? Today I'm going to talk you through. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewakaga Valley Homestead. Today I'm going to be talking you through how we go about incubating chicken eggs here and how you can use the incubator for other poultry as well. Today I am hiding out in my husband's music studio. The kids are watching a movie. It's pouring with rain outside, but I need to get some videos done. I've also got a croaky voice, so I apologise. But hopefully we'll get through this without too much coughing. Now, we bought ourselves an incubator a few years ago after trying to make a DIY incubator, which I'll leave a link down below for. We had really good success with the DIY incubator. It just wasn't big enough, and so we ended up buying one. And it was still a small one, but instead of doing 12 eggs, it did 24, and that was great. But we've actually splashed out and bought ourselves a big, it looks like a little bar fridge actually. It's got the wee door and everything. A Brisnia, I think it's called. I'll put a link to it down below. And I have found it really, really good. We get great hatch rates. We did fork out the extra for the pump on the top that keeps the humidity up. So we're not having to manually adjust that, which has been a real lifesaver. It is very set and forget. So we put the eggs in there, top up the water every couple of days. And then day 18 we stop the table from turning and up the humidity, and a couple more days later we have chicks that start hatching. It's really very hands off and so much easier than trying to maintain something manually. So if you're serious about hatching eggs, I really recommend you splash out and get the more expensive one. If you're happy just giving it a go, then making one at home with really cheap materials, I've got the instructions for those, so check out down below for how to do that as well. Once you've got yourself an incubator, the next thing you need to do is source yourself some eggs. If you've got a rooster and you've got the hens yourself, then you can start saving up the eggs from your own flock. However, if you don't have the breeds that you want, or you don't have a rooster, you can buy fertile eggs online. We're in New Zealand. I sell mine through Trade Me. I'm sure Craigslist in America probably has lots of listings for them too. You do pay between $2 an egg up to $4 an egg, depending on breeds and mixes and sort of the standard of the parents and that sort of thing. So it is more expensive than just buying eggs from the supermarket, but then you're getting future stock yourself, so it's worth investing in probably the better eggs. You can't use eggs from the supermarket in an incubator because those chickens have not been in with a rooster. They're not going to be fertile. If you are collecting eggs from either your own chickens or from someone that you know, you want to collect the eggs every day from the hens, maybe even twice a day. Make sure their nests are well lined with hay so they're not getting poopy and soiled. A poopy soiled egg increases the risk of bacterial contamination in the egg, and it's less likely to hatch, and it's more likely to get infected and infect other chickens as well, the other eggs. And you don't want to be washing your eggs either, because that will remove the protective bloom on the outside of the egg, and that creates a natural seal to keep the bacteria and stuff out. So if you've got soiled eggs, don't put them in the incubator. Use them for something. Give them a wash and use them for scrambled eggs or something. Try and use the cleanest eggs that you have without actually having to clean them to pop in the incubator. Right, and when you collect the eggs, write on them the date. We just use a pencil. Write the date and what breeds they are. Ours are all separated into different breeds, but some of them, the eggs look the same. Or I can tell the difference between most of them, but I'm kind of used to it now. A lot of them do look very similar, so it's really helpful just to write the initials on the end of the egg of what sort of breed you are collecting them, so in a week's time, once you've got enough, you're going to know which eggs are which. While you're gathering your eggs, you need to store them pointy side down. I find an egg carton a really good place to keep them, either an egg carton or in a big egg tray, and put them somewhere cool. You want them around sort of 10-15 degrees Celsius, which is, I can't remember, I'll find out. It's around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, so sort of 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit is about the temperature that you want to be keeping them. Well, basically a cold room. You don't want to be keeping them in the fridge because that is too cold and it can decrease the fertility rates. So keep them somewhere cool, and then every day a couple of times a day, just sort of tip them from one side to the other. So what I found worked really well was I collect mine in a big tray, you know, those 30 egg trays, and I put a book under one side so it's tipped up like that, and then later in the day I put it on the other side, and that just helps keep the yolks from attaching to the side, and just sort of naturally tilts them a wee bit. Usually what a hen will do in the wild or left to her own devices, well, she will make herself a nest and she'll go to it and lay once a day. And while she's in there, she'll kind of fluff around and the eggs will move a little bit. And so she'll lay for between 7 days and 15 days, and then she'll go and sit on the nest. And so that's basically what we're trying to replicate. So we're gathering those eggs. And you don't want to be using eggs that are over 10 days old. The fertility rates start dropping, but anything up to there is really good. So once you have collected the eggs that you are ready, you need to have your incubator up and running at the right humidity and the right temperature for at least 24 hours, so you know it's nice and stable, all stabilized and ready to go. Incubators need to be run at 37.5 degrees Celsius or 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want the relative humidity to be sitting around, right around sort of 40 to 50%. We do our smack bang in the middle at 45%. So you want to maintain that humidity all the way through until day 18, and at day 18 you put the humidity up but you keep the temperature level the same. So once your incubator has been running for 24 hours, it's come up to temperature, you know it's nice and steady. Now it's time to set your eggs into the incubator. So take your trays out, work out if they have funny dividers like ours does, work out how far apart they need to be, pop your eggs in. You want to store them pointy side down in the incubator. If they won't stay upright, they can lie on their side, that's okay as well. What you don't want is bubble side down, which is the round side, because that round side has the air pocket in it. So the chicks will need to be able to access that air pocket as they start pipping. So the last thing you want is for the egg to slowly work its way down and make that hole smaller. So either on their side or pointy side down. And the eggs will need to be tipped at least 3 times a day. So in the big Bresnia, however you say the word, our one, it has an automatic turner that actually goes every 45 minutes. If you're doing it manually, you just need, if you put an X on the top of each of the eggs, then you'll know, you know, in the morning you do it X up, the afternoon it's the other side up, and then the nighttime it's X side up again. And the reason we say 3 times is so that it means the next day it's, so over the night time it's say X side up, the next day it'll be not X side up for the night time. So whereas if you're doing it 4 times, it's going to be the long time over the night will be on the same side every time. So if you're doing it manually, do it odd numbers of times so that the long time that you don't do it over night time, it alternates day to day. This is just to stop the egg yolk from sticking to the side and help with the positioning of the chick. So the turning happens from day 1 all the way through to day 18, and then lockdown happens, so I'll talk about that shortly. During every 24 hours it's okay for the temperature to drop in the incubator. So our incubator has a setting on it that you can set it to drop once a day for up to 4 hours, which seems a little counterintuitive and a bit weird, but actually they have found that actually it gets a lot better hatch rates that way. So we have our set just to drop for an hour each day. So all it does, it doesn't actively cool them off. What it does is it just turns off all the heating and just lets the temperature naturally drop, which it emulates when the mum hops off the nest and she goes off and she finds her food and has a drink and all the things she has to do before she comes back. Once you get to day 18, this is when lockdown happens. So what you need to do is, if your eggs are all up on the ends, it's a good time to lie them on their side. It's the time you turn off the automatic turner, so all the eggs just stay straight. You crank up the humidity to between 60 and 80%, so we usually sit around 70%. And this is to make sure that when the eggs start to hatch that they don't dry out, because a dried out egg, the chick can get stuck while it's hatching, and if it can't turn to unzip itself, it will die. So having that really high humidity is really important. Eggs need to lose about 13 to 16% of their overall weight in that first 18 days. and if they don't lose enough, it means the egg's too soggy, and so the chick can actually drown. So there's a really fine balance in there for humidity. Of course, the chickens and ducks, it just happens just from the dampness of their own feathers. But because we don't have feathers and we're not doing that, we have to try and emulate it as best we can with the machines that we have. One way to check that your humidity levels are good is simply to weigh 3 or 4 eggs every 3 days over the first 18 days, and just plot them on the graph, make sure that they're losing weight steadily. So from around day 14 to 16 is usually when I candle our eggs. That's when you can buy like a candling torch, or you can actually use a candle if you want to. I use the light off my cell phone and just do it in sort of a dark corner, or shut the curtains and try and do it in a darkish room. And you just hold the light of your cell phone up against the rounded end of the egg and shine it through, and you should be able to see the eggs that are developing really well. The ones that are developed will be dark from the bubble end down, and the ones that haven't developed at all just become like a glowing orb. So the ones that haven't developed, this is the time to take them out, and it allows a bit more room for the ones that need to hatch. We often just throw those out into the garden. They're good manure, good compost. It just good to put in under like tomatoes. Once you've got the eggs all locked down, then you just leave them be, and on day 21 you should start hearing some squeaking and chipping and peeping from the chicks. Even if they haven't hatched yet, you'll often find like what we call a pip, which is just the first little hole that they make. They'll often crack through into the air bubble, so the actual egg itself, they're breathing through the air bubble, and you can hear through the egg, you can hear them cheeping even though they haven't made a hole yet, which is quite cool. And the big trick with hatching chicks is just leave them be. Just let nature take its course and leave them be. Chicks can pip and then not hatch for another 24 hours. And if you rush the process too quickly, one, they might not have absorbed the egg yolk properly, which means that they're more prone to an infection around the umbilicus. And two, they can actually bleed to death if you pull the shell away too quickly and it hasn't had a chance to vasoconstrict and get all the blood back into the chicken. So really don't rush it. If you have a chick that is half hatched and it's clearly got itself stuck, you can usually tell the membrane has gone brown and dry and stuck to the chicken. That's when you can add a little bit of warm water and just soften it back up, and just slowly pick away at the shell. If you see any blood, just stop and put the chick back in the incubator. It needs to rest in there a little bit longer to absorb a bit more of that blood. I have had to rescue a couple of chickens like this, especially with one of my older incubators that they just dried out. It was just too hard to keep that humidity really high. With the new incubator, I haven't had to help them, except for just this one where it had got itself a little bit stuck. It's the bit just on the side of its face had attached itself to the membrane, had just dried out on its face, and it couldn't get itself out. So I just untweaked that and away it went. It was fine. Once your chicks hatch, you can leave them in the incubator for up to 24 hours. They don't need food or water for those first 24 hours. And it's really crucial for the other ones coming up behind it that are still hatching that you're not opening and shutting the door and letting the temperature and more importantly the humidity dropping. So just leave the door shut as long as you can. Maybe open it once or twice a day to get out the chicks that are ready to go. Don't be in a rush to move them out to the brooder. You want them to be up and active and clearly strong and fluffy. You don't want them while they're still lying around and half wet looking. You want to wait until they're really, that classic day-old chick look. You want to wait until they're up and fluffy and ready to go before you start moving them out to the incubator, out to the brooder. Otherwise, you'll find that they'll chill too quickly. You'll often find they flip over and lie there with their legs flapping in the air. And if they're left like that, they'll get sat on or they'll just give up and die. So don't rush them out of the incubator. Leave them in there as long as you can. If your incubator has multiple levels or there's a risk of the chicks getting in the water, it's a really good idea to put like a basket over the top. Our one comes with a basket underneath that the eggs sit on, and then there's another basket that goes over the top that stops the chicks being able to get out. So we always attach that on day 18 as well. Your chicks won't necessarily all hatch within sort of the first 12 hours of each other. We often find that hatching day, especially with different breeds all in together, a hatching day can take up to sort of 3 days. With some of the ones with smaller eggs seem to hatch a wee bit faster, and the ones with the bigger eggs seem to hatch a little bit later. So we just leave the incubator running over those 3 days, and usually once we get to day 4, if there's no sign of pipping or anything, we usually just sort of presume that the egg is passed for whatever reason and move on, get the next lot in there. You can incubate other poultry. They do have different requirements for temperature and humidity, so I will put a link to a blog post down below that tells you all about incubating poultry, and it has the different temperatures and humidities there for you. Most incubators that you buy will also have instructions in them for different poultry as well. There are sometimes some problems that can happen with incubating eggs, and so I'll run through a few troubleshooting things for you. If none of your chicks hatch, chances are you either had a problem with the eggs. They might, well, for one, might not be fertile. 2, they could have had an infection problem, especially if the eggs were dirty. 3, your incubator settings might have been really, really off. 4, you might just not have waited long enough. Sometimes they can take, especially if the temperature's a little bit too cold, they can take an extra day or 2 to hatch. And if the parents weren't in great health, your eggs may develop somewhat, but may die partway through the incubation process. If your chicks hatch early or they've got deformities, sometimes the parents have got like nutritional deficiencies, or your settings on your incubator, like if your temperature's too high, they'll hatch earlier than 21 days. And sometimes you'll get sort of the deformed chickens, sort of ones with funny length legs or crooked legs that bend wrong, or yeah, all sorts of bizarre little deformities that can happen. If your chicks are hatching later than expected, so they should start pipping sort of the evening of day 20 and start hatching on day 21. If they're taking much longer than that, your incubator might be half a degree or a degree too cold. So even half a degree's temperature can make a difference. Just because the setting on the thermometer in there says whatever does not mean it's particularly accurate, so it is worth checking with a different thermometer whether they match up. You can get them calibrated. A lot of places, like electrical places, can calibrate thermometers for you. So if that's something that you're struggling with, it might be worth getting your incubator looked at to see if it needs its temperature calibrated. If you have what's considered a late stage death during incubation, so that's usually eggs that have died from day 15 to day 20, at that stage, if you shine a light through them, you should be able to see them move a little bit, especially around 15. By day 21, they often are so cramped in there you won't see them move so much, but they won't hatch either. Chances are your humidity was too high earlier in the incubation period and the chicks have pretty much drowned. If your chicks died during hatching, it's more likely that your humidity levels aren't high enough and they've managed to get themselves stuck with the membrane. So if this is the case for you, keep an eye on them as they're hatching and make sure they're making regular progress. If they're not, get the egg out, look really carefully, and see whether there's any of the brown on the membrane. If the membrane's dry and crusty, you can use a cotton warble dipped in a little bit of warm water and just sort of dab it on. Be careful not to get it in their face or in their nostrils, anywhere that they might accidentally breathe it in. So hatching your own chicks is a really fun activity. I love hatching day. It's really nice sitting in the lounge. Our incubator's in our lounge. It's nice sitting in the lounge hearing beep 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 as the chicks are starting to hatch, and the kids always love it. They'll often just lie there and watch the chicks being born. It's really a fantastic learning experience and I really enjoy it too. It's quite a special time to be involved in. So I hope you found this video useful, and if you have, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food and other homesteading bits and pieces. We'll see you in the next one.